8,000 people die by suicide every year.
Because they believe the heart was the center of intelligence, not the brain.
Persistence can overcome resistance.
Dr. Klimoe has been a professor in graduate school programs for the past 40 years. He is currently a full-time professor in the clinical program at the San Francisco Bay Area campus of the American Schools of Professional Psychology at Argosy University.
The title of this is the Care and Preservation of Private Experience and Belief in a Public and Scientific World, which, if you sort of dwell on that a bit, it's like what happens when you have private experiences and beliefs, but you're in a very public consensus reality world, and it's very dominated by the reigning scientific paradigm, which is very materialistic and physical reductionist. And a lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about is not necessarily falling under that paradigm. And another way to look at this, or kind of a subheading of this, is toward creating a new category for diversity, those with anomalous and paranormal experiences and beliefs. Meaning, we know the normal laundry list of acceptable, legally and ethically protected modes of minority, of diversity, and this is a contender for it. I'm seeing how far I can get by putting it out there that, gee, if you belong to this category, don't you suffer prejudice too? Revisiting diversity and what it means to be a culturally competent psychologist. Culturally competent psychologists, these are, you can probably just read this, it's to provide students with open work. So we're talking about the care and preservation of private experience and beliefs that are particularly of an anomalous and paranormal nature. And I'm trying to make a petition here. I've been doing it for a couple of years now at different conferences and things I've been writing about trying to do something like this. And I don't see it anywhere on the horizon. Nobody but me, as far as I know, is trying to do this kind of a thing. The question is, well, why do it in the first place? Well, I can tell you, to kind of jump to the finish here quickly, I've experienced prejudice all my life, being this kind of person, this minority. And I don't think that's a hell of a lot different than ethnicity or race or physical handicap or, yeah, sure they're all different. I'm overgeneralizing, but I know what it feels like, and I'm sort of trying to stand up to do something about it. And it takes education and consciousness raising to try to do anything about it. What do we mean by the anomalous? This is an APA publication, by the way, Varieties and a Variety of Anomalous Experiences Examining the Scientific Evidence, Cartania, Krippner et al., editors, 2000. An anomalous experience is an uncommon experience, or one that, although it may be experienced by a substantial amount of the population, is believed to deviate from ordinary experience or from usually accepted explanations of reality. Notwithstanding the presence of anomalous experiences in case studies of disturbed individuals, surveys of non-clinical samples have found little relationship between these experiences and psychopathology. This is something to keep coming back to emphasize. We're getting a bum rap on this. It doesn't mean you're crazy just because you think you saw a flying saucer or taking a bored one. Let's have a little bit of, as long as the person is competent and functional in other walks of life and in their day-to-day experiences, to paint them totally with a brush that's sort of dysfunctional is really heavy-handed. An instrument called the Anomalous Experiences Inventory, which I don't think any of the schools needed to use in their studies, but here are just 3 examples from it. How you respond to being able to communicate with supernatural forces. How would you respond to that? Do you think you're capable to do that? Would you go on record as saying that, even if it was anonymous? You probably would, anonymous. Have experienced other planes of existence beyond the physical. I'm going to think of you if you say yes to that. Having met an extraterrestrial. Oh, good luck. Now, I've studied extraterrestrial stuff for 40 years, 50 years now, 50 years. And there is something to this, a lot more than Carl Sagan thought. And I don't want to spend a weekend with you to get into this enough to do it some justice. But I know of what I speak, and most people don't. So I'm so used to interacting with people that know less about something than I do in these more fringy areas in their thinking. And so I just want you to keep the door open, and I'm always trying to do psychoeducation. Thomas Kuhn's major book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, is a major a study that was done at the University of Chicago by Thomas Kuhn, a historian of science. His point was that the anomalies, stuff that's inexplicable according to the reigning scientific paradigm, anomalies are the driving force behind theory change. The existing dominant scientific paradigm, when faced with an anomaly, can ignore it or explain it away according to the existing paradigm, which it almost always does, or accommodate it. If and when it is accommodated, the paradigm is replaced by a new, more inclusive and veridical one that can explain it. And that was this whole study of Western science, was that the discontinuous quantum jumps in our ever more inclusive and veridical scientific understanding of the universe we're in and of ourselves has been a function of finally not being able to hold out against the anomalies at the time, but actually accommodating them, hanging out with them, what we can learn from it, and ending up with a more inclusive scientific understanding than you had before when you just kept assimilating it into the existing paradigm that by explaining it away, technically, because the existing paradigm really wouldn't handle. Paranormal, they're related. I've been asked why do I use both anomalous and paranormal. Paranormal, very strange, not able to be explained by what scientists know about nature and the world, this is Webster's, and some different kinds of synonyms. Altered and higher states of consciousness. Now, not all altered states of consciousness are sufficiently lead you to experiences and beliefs that are so paranormal or anomalous that they can get you into trouble, or they just don't compute in other people's radar, and they just fall outside of on the very fringes or outside of a consensus reality, the day-to-day lived experience, as we all agree to it, as being objectively real and held in common. So once you move into an altered state, away from the normal baseline waking state of consciousness, you begin to stray from what you can attend to with that state of consciousness. It's called state-specific information processing in consciousness studies. Non-ordinary information processing capacity, such as exceptional high creativity and transformationality, involving psychic or parapsychological events, phenomena, and processes. I'll come back to each of these in turn, but these are the domains, the subdomains within this new diversity category that I'm sort of suggesting be considered by practitioners and by science in general and by social science. Unusual spiritual or transpersonal experiences, beliefs, and practices, particularly those involving personal cases of Stan Groff's and his wife's notion of spiritual emergence. And if a spiritual emergence, a spontaneously emerging idiosyncratic spiritual emergence on your part, not an organized religion, not a traditional thing, people have been down that path with doctrine and everything else, but you're just kind of inventing the wheel of your own emerging connection to a larger reality and transcendental feeling. If you don't get support in it, you get people saying you're crazy, whatever they may happen, the spiritual emergence can lead to a spiritual emergency. And you can actually go psychotic, not because of what you did, but because you're getting zilch support and a lot of questioning. You shouldn't be thinking what you're thinking, you shouldn't be experiencing what you're experiencing, and that can really discombobulate you. Here's the psychic and parapsychological. There's three basic categories. I am a parapsychologist. There's about 200 of us, 250 of us in the world. It's like an endangered species. And when you look at the field, you think, why are there so few people, especially in universities and in the scientific community, go on record about this as having expertise in it, doing research in it, trying to get funding to do research in it. And I just think it's a whole political thing. It's quite political, but I won't bore you with that part of it. So the three categories: extrasensory perception could be reframed as anomalous cognition, ESP. This is a traditional, fairly rich area for this. I can't do that. Psychokinesis, PK, mind over matter, fork bending, starting stopped clocks just by putting your intention on them, stuff like that. But the more interesting area is in animate systems, psychic healing, anomalous healing, faith healing. There's a technical term in parapsychology called DMILS, distant mental influence on living systems. You can tell when you're being stared at, even if you can't see who's staring at you. This has been replicated oftentimes. Bio-PK, or biologically oriented psychokinesis. And the third category, which is the one I specialize in most, is survival of physical death. Do we survive the death of our bodies? And if so, how do you study it? How do you know? You could say, or do you care? I think everybody cares, but until you die and go through that one-way valve, you don't know, probably. That's why in the book I wrote about this, I started off saying, look, I can't, as a living, sentient, embodied being, tell you what it's like to die on the other side. I can't. But I can amass for you kind of encyclopedically, cross-culturally, across time, a lot of stories from human beings about what's supposed to happen there, does happen, or happened for them, or happened for somebody, or whatever it was. So this involves discarnate human spirits, ghosts, hauntings, and apparitions, mediumship and channeling, or communication with those on the other side, the afterlife, out-of-body experiences. Can there be, can you have disembodied intelligence? Can you have consciousness operating irrespective of or separate from the physical body and the physical brain? Now, basic, mainstream, reigning scientific paradigm view is you can't. And yet there are these contraindicating stories and built up over the decades and decades, centuries actually, that it's serious food for thought, and I've hung out with it for decades now, and I'm rather convinced that we do survive the physical death of our bodies. I'm part of an international group that publishes in this area and has expertise in this area, and university-based as well. And pretty much all of us have learned over time or become convinced that we do survive physical death. And we're not stupid, and we've done a lot of research, and we've also, we couldn't avoid all the critics and the loyal opposition that keep saying, you know, knock that junk out of your head, that pseudoscience, that quackery, that whatever. And so we've had to kind of each time come back and hone our skills and our ability to feel and to selectively bring to bear the sort of minority literature review domain that most mainstreamers are not familiar with. And when they're not, you just bounce off each other. You can't even have discourse. And that's the way it usually is. Now, I've studied this field since I was 16, a long time, since I was in high school. And my own library has thousands of books in this area, and I'm part of I'm the research part of a new, large international organization on behalf of people having experiences like this. And we're trying to do it right this time. We're going to have a large website presence, and I'll let people know when it's up. But it's, I take it exceedingly seriously. And there's things tied to it like that, how much the government knows about these things, and they do. I guarantee you they do. You feel the goosebumps in me from what I know about these things. But I take my word for it, because I'm flying in the face of 99% of what you get in the consensus reality, and the media, and everything else. So you get laughter. And understandably so. Why am I on this mission? From personal experiences to some extent, but also from just libraries of reading in it. Many surveys have done, polls have been done, large N ones, scientifically done ones, that we can extrapolate to external validity, extrapolate to a larger population from the small scientifically sampled one. And more than half the population in general believes there's something out there and could even be visited by it. A sub-percent of that, maybe 15–20% have actually seen things or experienced things. But that's a lot of people when you get up there. We keep moving on here now. Bigelow, I went to a retreat he did on survival of physical death. He also has put many millions of dollars into UFO research. He's the biggest landowner in Nevada and multi-billionaire. And he believes in survival of physical death, and he believes in UFO stuff, and he puts money where his mouth is. He did an endowed chair at the University of Nevada in this field. Somebody's there every year in that endowed chair representing these kinds of things. So he put money into a Roper poll that went out to, responded by 6,000 respondents. And the results of that poll was sent out, and he paid for the sending it out, to 100,000 psychiatrists, psychologists, and counselors throughout the country. I don't know if you got one of these, but a lot of people did. Just to let them know, I'm not trying to prove anything here, but you might want to keep in mind that a lot of people claim to have had this kind of experience. Or in the scientific sampling, that by 18% of those 6,000, reporting these different characteristics that have been correlated with being abducted. So the interesting thing about Mac was he wrote a couple of books, including a bestseller book called Abduction, and it came from his his clinical clients and then later his own research subjects as he carried this further. And he found that he came to believe that people are actually being abducted by non-human extraterrestrials. Now, he's a Pulitzer Prize winning author, he's a full professor at Harvard, he's a psychiatrist, he's terribly well respected, and after a while Harvard got sick and tired of getting more publicity about their professor and his abduction book, and woo, UFOs, that they decided to go all the way. They said, look, we know how hard it is to try to dislodge a full professor from a major university like Harvard. You be careful, because it's not easy to do. And they took him on. It was like a witch hunt. I would call it that, but it was whatever it was. But they wanted to dislodge him from being a professor. They wanted him fired. And he represented himself. And I'll make the long story short. And there was a whole Harvard board of trustees and everything. They're lawyers. And he won. He won. They had to back down. They had to formally apologize and say, we take it back. You reinstated. You're a full professor. No more slings and arrows aimed at you. So he had to know what he was talking about, and I've taken that to heart. It's one of my teaching stories. I have to be ready, like Mac was, to handle the negative repercussions and attributions, including the ones on a lack of professionalism, of not seeing the whole picture, of being too biased about my own views. I have to be very careful about those things, and not do to somebody else what they do to me. Let's just look at the first one, please. I have come to see that the abduction phenomenon is an important philosophical, spiritual, and social implications. Has, above all, more than any other research I've undertaken, this work has led me to challenge the prevailing worldview or consensus reality which I had grown up believing and has always applied to my clinical scientific endeavors. That we participate in a universe or universes that are filled with intelligences from which we have cut ourselves off, having lost the senses by which we might know them. And he goes on to say, efforts to establish a pattern of psychopathology other than disturbances associated with a single or repeated traumatic event have been unsuccessful. Psychological testing of abductees has not revealed evidence of mental or emotional disturbances that could account for their reported experiences. This is an ongoing theme in the research I've done on this. The spiritual stuff, the spiritual emergence. This is not quite all on the screen, but here's like 10 of these different things that this one researcher who's worked a lot with spiritual emergence and spiritual emergency and with the Groffs. Shamanic crises in which one loses contact with one's environment and undergoes a psycho-spiritual death and rebirth experience. The awakening of Kundalini. I knew a guy that happened to him once. He thought he was going crazy. He needed some kind of support from the medical profession or from psychological profession, and he wasn't getting it, and so he was really lost. So it helps to have some kind of support, some kind of psychoeducation, some kind of bibliotherapy, some kind of something, and that's all I'm hoping for out of all of this, is to just have a little more level playing field, at studying up a bit more on it, rather than having this, it's werewolves, it's demons. You're talking about demons. You're just trying to support a superstitious anti-science thinking. Psychological renewals, the return to the center, crisis of psychic opening in which paranormal phenomena occur spontaneously and may include out-of-body experiences, telepathic, clairvoyant ability, past life experiences, communication with spirit guides and channeling. See, a lot of this stuff is like, you go into the university and you pull this stuff out and it's like, we have a place to put you, we have a place to put in our thinking for you and what you're talking about. And I just want to move a step beyond that. What's a little more interesting and integrative and interactive, and there could be a little bit of learning experience on the other person's part, not totally on me to just keep boning up on the DSM-5 to take each of those candidate diagnostic categories and try to find a way to say that's not all inclusive, that's the only way to look, it's not totally covering of the thing, except when it is in individual cases. Personal creative vision. This is not a separate category so much as I've had this all my life as an artist, as a creative person, a kind of a visionary kind of a thing. I started this life as a poet and artist. My adolescence, I developed my own mythopoetic system. I was a friend of birds, kind of Icarus mythopoetic system, mythological system, yearning to fly, getting too near the sun. The best metaphor I could think of was I want to get into the sun. I want to get close to the source of things, the source. And yet there's a negative repercussion to getting too close to the sun. You melt the wax on your wings and you fall back down and go boom, you know, and it's a break from functional reality. It can. Running away, and then it came down in a lot of my dialogue with mental health professionals. Are you running away from the one true reality? You're just running away from reality. You're fantasy prone. You're running away from reality. Into ... Who knows? Or are you running away from one reality, or moving from one reality toward another reality as real or equally real or more real? That's always the way I felt it. Always the way I experienced it. But that's not. Most of us don't co-dwell in more than one reality. We have the concept of the daily waking consciousness attended to consensus reality, and that's it. High creativity, too much processing is going on. The transliminality between the unconscious and the conscious, between the preconscious and the conscious, the kinds of, just kind of skim that thing. But there is a relationship between psychopathology and being too creative. Not too high IQ, because that is a conformist quality to the information processing aspects of, to some of it could be argued. Whereas creativity can be rather a loose cannon. You just let too much in, you make too many connections, and it runs contrary to reality testing and to what you really need to know to get safe voyage through this consensus reality that we have here. Novelty, salience, neural hyperconnectivity, increased associations. If you bring enough of these things together, and it's too much good stuff, and it begins to become dysfunctional. It has become for me. So I'm here as a poster boy of somebody. You can be too creative for your own good. If you don't have enough convergent capacity, information processing, to counterbalance the divergent production and the divergent opening to so many possibilities, so many levels, so many wavelengths, so many perspectives, so much rival hypotheses, and it can overwhelm you. You can look at a brain imaging thing of it, and it's just, everything's going on at once. And if you don't have any way to damp it down, to put the control rods back in the train reaction, so to speak, and soak up some of that, you're just, you're going to burn up in a way. It's like too near the sun, the Icarus notion. And I had that experience a number of times. How did it end up on paper? I was crazy. I was dysfunctional. I've been called all kinds of things, including paranoid schizophrenic, and locked up for them. And the key thrown away, and I couldn't get back out even though I went in voluntarily with my own mother. So the long, sordid story about what's been done unto me by the dominant system, from lack of understanding or from lack of expertise to work with someone like that. TASTE. My friend Charles Tart started an organization called TASTE, got funding to do it. It's an archive for science transcendental experiences where they were willing to go online, put their stories out there. You go to TASTE, just Google TASTE. And the stories are on there. These are people who are notable scientists and academics, reputable, known people, well-known people. And you want them all to go on record with their own names and affiliations saying, I've had this weird-ass experience. You know, I have this interesting belief and I can't shake it, or I have certitude about it. But he couldn't get very many of them to put their names down, even though that was what he set the thing up for. I was the second person he got. I put my name down. So ASBP is not down there. This was long before that, but I would not do that. I drive defensively. I'm careful. I scope the thing out like a chess game ahead of time. Who am I addressing? Where are they coming from? What's likely to work and not work? I'm not about to make myself so vulnerable that they'll yank, not my license because I don't have one, but they'll yank my job, they'll yank my credibility, and I'll lose the bully pulpit of whatever I had at whatever level I had. And I don't want to do that. I don't want them to have the satisfaction of doing that to me as somebody who's advocating these kinds of things, where there aren't that many people in the public world and the professional world and the academic world who are willing to go on record and do this, to stand forth and model this. These are the kinds of things that are often associated with these anomalous and paranormal stuff. Absorption, hypnotizability, dissociative tendencies, personality disorder. I'm cherry picking the ones that best fit, come to mind when somebody comes in and presents their story, or delusions of grandeur kind of thing sometimes. Or, it's hard not to feel that way when some of these things are happening. You know, the spotlight sort of is on you. And who do you compare notes with, and who do you go to commiserate, and sometimes you sort of can't, so it can build in you. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can have your own, I mean, in Europe, there's whole organizations of people who hear voices. And they're totally functional, families, jobs, but they get together to support each other and to tell their stories to each other. And because they have that support group, they don't have to kind of lose it too much off the other. And it's true for other things too, like other related anomalous experiences or conditions, I think, but more in Europe than here. Odd beliefs or magical thinking that influences behavior, like believing in clairvoyance or telepathy or sixth sense. So it's hard not to have this stuff begin to get included in under DSM-5. And I have to know about these things because I cannot be in ignorance about these things. I have to be expecting that this is the initial first line of resistance in the mental health profession, very often, unless they've done their own reading, they've had their own personal experiences, and nothing beats personal experience. Once somebody's had a personal experience, they don't have to do any reading, they don't have to be proven, they need more data, better designed experiments. It's incarnated, it's been incorporated, they have carnal knowledge of it in their bones, and they're sort of converted in that way. So you've got the more people in the scientific community, in the academic community, who have come over through personal experience, the less you're alone. And I'm always looking for people like that. This is a nice definition by John Nelson, who's a psychiatrist, who wrote a book called Healing the Split, Integrating Spirit into Our Understanding of the Mentally Ill. One of several altered states of consciousness transient or persistent to prevent integration of sensory or extrasensory data into reality models accepted by the broad-based consensus reality, and that leads to maladaptive behavior and social sanctions. To the confusion of many, this definition also describes several potentially adaptive altered states of consciousness, highly useful, highly functional ones, often peak experience center ones, often performance center ones as well. They're all dumped together as all painted by the same brush very often. Our failure to distinguish between malignant and benign psychotic ASCs bedevils both mainstream psychiatry and also schools of thought, and that was the reason for writing that book. Here are some, good, I'm running out of time. Here are some suggested ways for working with clients or friends or neighbors or whatever who have had these kinds of anomalous and paranormal experiences, those 6 or 7 subcategories I talked about, more and more of them. Von Kamm did one of the first dissertations on phenomenological study of anything, human experience, and he studied the experience of feeling really understood by another person. And I think in the decades I've been involved with the mental health area, I think that can be truly healing. It can be real breakthrough. If somebody senses that you really understand them, no matter how nutty they may be from your or somebody else's perspective, it can be breakthrough. It's like almost like ECT or something. It breaks up the old things a bit because they've not had that experience of being in the same room with somebody who they feel really understood by them. But what's it take for you to really understand them? It's part of the questions.